morning. It's Tuesday, February 2nd, and this is the Red Sea Roundup. I'm your host, Mike Beauvais. Today we'll be talking to one of my favorite guests all the time because she's the one who actually started this show. Megan Silas is here with us already at the first part.
Yeah, well, I couldn't wait to get on. I mean, I'm just like chomping at the bit here. So, such a blessing to be back, Mike, and so great to see Dennis. And I'm just so psyched to be here. It's wonderful.
And I also want to say good morning to Dennis.
Good morning, Mike.
Who's, as always, is managing our control board, keeping an eye on me, which is a full-time job.
You're doing great, as always.
And Megan and I will be talking a little later about homeschooling. I did want to mention that today is a feast day in the Catholic Church, and it is the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord, the day that the Virgin Mary completed the period of confinement and took Jesus to be redeemed in the temple. And Megan had told me earlier this had a special meaning to her, this feast day. So
it does. Well, and for those of you who need a little bit more reference, this is the fourth mystery of the joyful mysteries. You shall know it as that. But the reason I love this feast day and just the whole concept of the presentation is because, so, you know, when Christ was born, you had the shepherds that saw him, and then you had the wise men that came later for Epiphany, and that's sort of just the real tip of the iceberg as far as the rest of the world knowing he's there. But now, Feast of the Presentation, he is brought out. He's placed before the assembly. And the reason I'm so, one of the reasons I'm so attached to this particular feast and the mystery is because of Simeon and Anna, Saint Simeon and Anna. They are one of, you know how we all probably have our saints that we pray to every day, right? That we kind of just are in our arsenal of saints that we go to. And Saint Simeon and Anna are two of those saints for me that I pray to every day. And what I specifically ask of Saint Simeon and Anna is that the church would be increased in her desire for Christ's return. Because if you think about these two saints, they're old. They hang out in the temple day after day after day because they have been promised by the Holy Spirit that they will see the Lord. And they are faithful in waiting and desiring his appearance. And then he appears, he's there. And we have that wonderful prayer referred to in Latin as the Nunc Dimittis, but the now let your servant go in peace. My eyes have seen my salvation. And that's what I think we should just all be just thirsting for, longing for, to see our Lord, his return in glory, and or when we see him at the end of our earthly life. So I ask them for that greater desire for us all to want to see Christ and his return. So.
One of the other interesting aspects of this feast day is in the past we celebrated Candle Mass with the presentation of the Lord. And where this comes from is the understanding that Christ is the light to the world. Mm-hmm. And Mary, by carrying him to the temple, is carrying to the light of the world. And so in remembrance of this, we bless all the candles in the church. And people would bring candles from their home and have them blessed. And so as a reminder that as Mary carried the light to the world, every time we're dismissed at Mass, we are intended to carry that light out to the world. So that's a beautiful tradition that's associated with that. Wanted to make sure that we give out our phone number in case anyone wants to give us a holler just to say hi to Megan or let us know what's going on in your parish or join the conversation. The phone number is 85-LOVE-RED-C. That is 855-683-7332. And don't hesitate to give us a call.
Well, and I'd like to encourage, as Mike said, we're going to talk a little bit about homeschooling later when we do the interview segment. And I would love for any homeschoolers out there to get on the phone and call us because I am not claiming by any stretch of the imagination to be an expert on this topic. I know there are folks out there who are way more experienced in this realm than I am. I'm just going to kind of give my personal take on it. But if any of those folks would call in and just say that I'm insane, what I'm saying, and I'm totally wrong, love that. That would be great. Or if you want to agree with me, that's okay too.
I get that a lot. You're crazy. You're wrong. Dennis, how are you doing?
We're doing quite well. I actually had a very nice, restful weekend. I was very excited to see Megan coming back to the studio. I saw your email. I thought maybe she might be calling in on the phone. I thought, Megan has the opportunity to get back on the air. She's going to show up, and here she is. Yeah, I'm very excited about that. We have a great event going on tonight. I can tell the radio group, the listeners this because we shared it last week. But tonight, if y'all could pray for our event, it's going to be an ecumenical event to bring about some Christian unity or an effort to do that. Red Sea Catholic Radio has the opportunity tonight to pre-screen the movie Risen. Some of you might have seen that on various news channels, sports channels. It's really all over the map right now and lots of commercials. We have an opportunity to fill one theater, and we chose to invite about 20 different churches from around our area that are of all denominations to come to see this movie courtesy of Red Sea Catholic Radio. So we've assigned tickets, and it's going to be an exciting time to be able to share with them, hey, Red Sea Catholic Radio is here. We have shows that you can call in to disagree about the Catholic faith and have a nice conversation about the Catholic faith. We want to promote that and pray for Christian unity tonight. It's a one-time event, so if y'all could out there pray for this event to go well, and that the Holy Spirit lead those that need to be there tonight to be there to see the movie and to hear about Red Sea Catholic Radio. One
of Megan's favorite causes is Christian unity.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little earlier, so
I told her about this, and we did a little fist bump.
Yes, I was very excited. Yeah, I know that y'all probably every now and then hear that ad about Christian unity, and
we have it on still.
So they're basically there's a couple ads that I just wanted to make just because they're my pet things. Just God calls us certain things.
Exactly.
Some people have a passion for the pro-life ministry. Some people have a passion for prison ministry. Some people have a passion for this, that, or the other. And this concept of Christian unity is something that God has just really called my heart to spend time in prayer about. And so that's exciting. I'm so excited about that, and a little bit jealous that I'm not here to have been involved in that coming to fruition. But, God works in His ways and in His times, and I'm just excited that it's happening. So I hope it's a real success. And I know that through the fruits of this, you are going to get some people listening to this station who had never considered the idea of listening to Catholic radio before, and are going to hear some things that are going to really convict their hearts.
Yeah,
and I think there are going to be some conversions through this. I really do.
That's our prayer. Our prayer.
I have no doubt.
Pray with us if y'all don't mind. So help us out.
All right. Before we get too far into the program, I wanted to touch on a few things going around in our community, opportunities for everyone in your individual parishes and in the Bryan College Station and greater community. St. Anthony's is starting a Bible study for Lent on the first letter to the Corinthians. We're going to start actually the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. And since it's 11 weeks, it'll go just past Easter, but it'll be on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. And if you haven't said you're coming yet, let me know. There's contact information on the website at St. Anthony's.
Wait, if I'm not mistaken, is not 1 Corinthians your favorite Pauline letter? Or
yes.
Is it second?
No, it is 1 Corinthians.
All right, so you have the opportunity, folks, to listen to a great teacher talk about his favorite letter from St. Paul. This is a great opportunity. So I'm just saying, you should consider it.
Of all the letters in the New Testament, this one touches the closest to some of the issues that we're going through right now.
Yeah, they were a mess in Corinth.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say that.
No,
but
they were.
Yes.
Come on.
They were a mess, and I would say that a lot of times we're a mess also, so we need all the help we can get. Also, if you missed last night, it's not too late to take part in the healing mission at St. Anthony's. The second session is tonight, and they're individual, so you won't have missed anything. by going into tonight, and they're at 7 p.m. There's one tonight and another one tomorrow night, Wednesday, also at 7 p.m. So Paul Rimniak is leading it, and I've heard him speak, and you should have a great time, and it's be well worth your effort to go and come to this. St. Anne in Somerville this weekend, the February 6th and 7th, is having their SAM food collection weekend. So if you're going to St. Anne's, bring your donated food items, place them in the tub found in the vestibule, and they want to thank you in advance for your generosity. We mentioned last time, and St. Thomas Aquinas is also doing the Rediscover Jesus. St. Anthony's just finished up their book groups, but St. Thomas is starting theirs February 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th, and they're going to be talking. We had mentioned most of the parishes had passed out the book. I hope everybody here had a chance to read this. It's an excellent book. Megan, if you didn't get a copy, we can get you one.
They actually handed it out at our parish as well. So that book is got legs. It's going around the Catholic parishes, and so that's great. And you know what? Even if you haven't discovered Jesus the first time, feel free to come and rediscover him. It's okay.
That's right. Actually, when we did the study at St. Anthony's, one of the interesting things we talked about is that the biggest place we need to rediscover Jesus is in our hearts.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't had a chance to read it, take the chance to read it. And if you go to St. Thomas Aquinas, take the opportunity to do the book study, because the conversations and the reflections are absolutely wonderful, because you get different perspectives, and you can find out a lot of things that you might not have gotten out of the book that you will get out of the book after hearing other people's impressions.
Yeah, and I think, often we as Catholics, there's so much stuff you can do as a Catholic, right? You can say the rosary, you can say the chaplet, you can do the liturgy of the hours, you can do this, that, and the other, and sometimes it's totally overwhelming, right? If you really want to become a better Catholic, fall more in love with Jesus. It all flows from that. If you're in love, just think about when you're courting someone, or you're really in a relationship. Those efforts that you make don't feel like efforts, because they flow naturally from that heart of love and just the desire to be pleasing to the other. This rediscovering Jesus, just growing more and more in love with him, that's what's going to make you a better Catholic, no matter how that ends up exhibiting itself in your life.
I think that is perhaps why St. Thomas Aquinas, at the end of his life, said that everything he knows is nothing but so much straw.
Right. Yeah.
Because ultimately it is our relationship with Jesus that determines our faith, and not what we know. Not saying that we don't need to know stuff, but...
because to know him is to love him.
Right.
That's the thing.
Because St. Jerome did assure us that,
ignorance of Scripture is ignorance of Christ. There you go.
Hey, quick question. The St. Anthony's Bible study that you're teaching, tell me again what time that was. I was turning away from the mic.
It is Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. in the conference room.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that clarification. Wasn't sure if you mentioned it or if I missed it. So,
well, it's very possible that I missed it.
I'll check the recording.
Yeah, there we go. We'll edit that out. St. Joseph's in Bryan is also offering a book study. They're taking a look at Forming Intentional Disciples by Sherry Weddle. They're offering this twice on Wednesdays, once on Thursdays, and once on Fridays, beginning this week, and this will last for 12 weeks. They're meeting in the PAC, so if you haven't signed up yet, you probably need to do that.
This seems to be a little bit of a trend that I think is great, where the parishes are starting to offer things at more than one time.
Yes.
That's great. I mean, just to give more people the opportunity to get out there. And because I know there's so many times people say, well, I would have liked to have done that, but I'm not available at that time. So I think it's a really great trend that seems to be going on here.
And what we've noticed is that, not everybody has every single day of the week free. And there are times sometimes when you have a day free that something comes up on that day. So if there's more opportunities, when you do have something come up, you can then go to one of the other sessions. So it's nice to be able to do that. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we're starting to head that direction in a lot of the parishes around here. If you like chocolate or coffee, and both of these I love, St. Mary's Catholic Center this coming weekend is having a fair trade chocolate and coffee sale. It's going to be going on after all the masses. So even if you don't go to Mass at St. Mary's, good opportunity to come over here and pick up some chocolate and some coffee.
There you go. You don't have to feel bad about that chocolate. You've done something good.
Exactly. And remember, Matthew Kelly tells you don't give up chocolate.
Yeah, so you're quite all right here.
Exactly. Another reminder, St. Thomas Aquinas, on February 11th at 6 p.m., they will have a Mass for the Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes, and this is on the World Day of the Sick. They're having this for all the sick in their community. The Mass will include an anointing of those who are sick. So take the opportunity to attend Mass at 6 p.m. on February 11th at St. Thomas Aquinas. This is also a good time to remind everyone what next Wednesday is. Not tomorrow, next week. We are entering the season of Lent.
Wednesday?
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun.
I need that sound effect here. I'll try to find it.
Well, you can pull it out of the recording and keep it separate, and we'll use it for every show.
Megan's dun, dun, dun.
But this is a reminder that Lent is starting. For those of you all that have German or Cajun heritage, you will know this by the fact that Mardi Gras is coming up. But for the rest of us, it's Ash Wednesday coming up. So this is a chance for us to prepare ourselves for the coming season of Lent. And this is a season of abstinence, of penance, and of prayer. We are intended to prepare ourselves for the coming of, for the resurrection of our Lord at Christmas morning.
Easter.
You said Christmas.
Oh, did I?
Well, it's so close to Christmas. You're not even over it yet.
My wife keeps reminding me, we just took down the Christmas tree. But and here it's already Lent. But yes, we need to consider our Lent, and most of the parishes have been advertising the Don't Give Up Chocolate, Best Lent Ever by Matthew Kelly. But even if you're not participating, and I would encourage you to go ahead and participate in this, because the Best Lent Ever, it's easy to do. Just go to dynamiccatholic.com, and every day you'll get a reflection and maybe even a video and things from Matthew Kelly help you guide your Lenten observances. So take advantage of that. But even if you're not doing that, take the time to think of how you're going to make this Lent stand out from all the other ones you've done before, and what is it that you can do to prepare yourself for Easter.
Listen to a half hour of Red Sea Catholic Radio each day, maybe.
No, that sounds good.
Does that sound familiar, Mike?
It sounds very familiar. He's teasing me because the way I started listening to Red Sea is a Lent several years back. I can't even count how many it was. I decided for Lent I was going to turn off the soundtrack in my car and switch it to Red Sea Radio. And I did that for the entire Lent, and my radio has not left Red Sea since
Little
then.
did he know he was going to be a show host.
Yes. It's amazing how these things happen.
Yeah. I do have one thing I can announce real quick, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
The Iron Sharpens Iron Central Texas Fellowship of Catholic Men have their 4th annual conference on February 20th of this year. It goes from 8:30 to 4 p.m. at San Jose Catholic Church. If you want to register, and I highly encourage all men of this area to do that, you can do that at sentexcatholic.com, and it's CENTEX Catholic.com. They have Tim Staples and Trent Horn. It's a powerful 1-2 punch they've got there this year. Thaddeus and I will be doing a live broadcast there in a couple of weeks, I guess. And so we're sponsoring that event, and we're very happy to be a part of that again this year. So the 4th annual men's conference on Saturday, February 20th. You can sign up again at CENTEXCatholic.com.
And I think we're not going to have enough time to touch on our Around the World segment.
How about this?
We can flex
because
into the break.
We're flexible. We can go to the break and come back, and we'll talk about that at the top before we get into homeschooling.
Why don't we do that? So
okay. Well,
let's take a short break, and we'll see you on the other side. And we are back. Quick reminder of our phone numbers. If you do want to join in the conversation or say hello to Megan or tell us about what's going on at your parish that we might not have mentioned, the phone number is 85-LOVE-RED-C. That's 855-683-7332. And we're back with Megan, but we said we were going to talk a little bit about the Around the World segment.
Yeah, I always love the Around the World, and when I was doing the show and I wasn't able to talk about it because the other part ran long, I was always really bummed about that. But I didn't feel like I could just borrow time from the guest, but because, I'm offering the time, then we can do it because I like to talk about this kind of current event stuff. So go for it.
Well, I always come across articles, be it in the paper or online, and there are always aspects of it that strike me from a religious perspective as being sort of significant in our world. And this one struck me because it was on AOL, and it was an article on a communities founded in Florida by the founder of Domino's Pizza. He's sold Domino's before he founded this. The community is called Ave Maria. They also have a Catholic university there in the community, and they try to live by Catholic principles. They don't allow the sale of pornography in town. They don't allow the sale of contraceptives in town. And they just have formed a community which seems to be growing in leaps and bounds. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't so much the article that struck me. It was the comments at the end. And I make it a point, usually when I see anything religious on the news, I read the comments to see what's going on. And it struck me the animosity, the vitriol in some of the comments at the audacity that people might choose to live by certain rules that they all agree on. And there were all kinds of comments and, them trying to keep out other people and, what do they do when a Protestant wants to move in or an atheist or this sort of thing. And what struck me is I don't ever see this in homeowners associations. Every homeowners association has rules. I know a homeowners association doesn't allow political yard signs. Mm-hmm. That's because they don't want, a war breaking out if you have a Republican and a Democrat living next door and the signs keep getting bigger because, and so, the homeowners association has just decided they don't allow this, and the people that move there agree by their moving there to abide by those rules.
Right.
And yet when I read those comments, it's like this is the worst thing that has possibly ever happened, that someone would dare to say we have agreed to abide by Catholic principles.
I think that when I hear about that, it really gets at a grander issue that I think that we've lost sight of in America, that government is to be by the consent of the governed. If the governed in this town consent to these laws, then the government is by consent to the governed. And anyone who moves into it has that choice to be part of that community or not. There's no one forcing anyone to move into Ave Maria. There's no one forcing anyone to move out if they don't agree with what the beliefs that are being displayed in the laws are. So there's no compulsion in any way. It's just a matter of this is what we've set up. This is the elected officials have been encouraged to do this, and this is what we're doing. And so you can take it or leave it. And the very fact that people who have absolutely no interest in living there want to tell them how to govern their town, I think is really the grander issue here. And what is at stake in the grander issue of the election that we're going to have coming up is, what does it mean to have a government? What is the purpose of the government? Where does government have its role in a community, in a state, in a country? And what does consent of the governed mean in this day and age? And you can see that to a large degree, people want to dictate, even at the smallest level of a small town, how it's governed, regardless of how the people who live there want to live. So it's interesting.
Well, I also think a part of this is our desire of living only by our personal rules.
Yes.
And I think, for instance, in this case, they have their rules and someone is complaining that they shouldn't be allowed to do this because that person has different standards. But then aren't you forcing everyone to live by your standards?
Absolutely. Well, and I think there's also the idea that, okay, so in a Catholic perspective, things like contraception, things like pornography, they are sins. They are sinful behaviors. And the idea that one person's sinful behavior doesn't affect other people is the thing that is really, I think, a big fallacy here. As one body in Christ, or even just a community, even if you're not all Christians or whatever, the way that one person lives out their lives, even if it seems like it's just behind closed doors, actually does affect the whole community. When you've got pornography at a store, that's going to affect the whole community, whether or not each individual is purchasing it. So they are making decisions about how they want their community to live out its values. And I think you're right. People, they don't want, even if they don't even want to partake of it, this idea that someone's telling them what to do, it's so bothersome to so many people, when in the end, no one's telling them to live there.
Exactly. I was going to mention, this thing about not wanting to abide by rules. If you want to see this in action, look at any red light in our city.
Well, that's true. Although I have to say I was actually in favor of them getting rid of the red light cameras because there was a whole bunch of issues around that. Because I just recently heard there was a community near me where I live now that's thinking of installing them. I'm like, don't go there. You don't want to go down that road. So anyway.
All right. That's enough on our Around the World segment. Let's talk about homeschooling.
Okay, so I have to, again, make the disclaimer here that I am by no way an expert in homeschooling because I just started doing it this fall. So I think the grander question here is why and how's it going and everything. It just, there's so many things around it. And one thing I would say before saying anything else, you know what? Homeschooling is not right for everyone. And public school isn't right for everyone, and private school is not necessarily right for everyone, and parochial school is not necessarily right for everyone. Kids are different, parents are different, environments are different. So I'm not going to be one of those people that comes here and says, "Oh, this is the way. You got to do it. This is the way." Because I think there are some families that should not homeschool. I mean, just the dynamics in the family aren't right for it. So don't anyone think that I'm here to convert the masses on homeschooling. Although I will say my experience has been good so far. But I'll let you ask the questions instead of just taking over.
Well, I think the main thing I was interested in asking you to come on is explore your personal experience in this a little bit, because I am quite sure there are numerous people out there that, even if they're not doing it, have considered it.
Right.
And so I thought it might be of value to just look at, some of the things that helped you make that decision, some of the factors that might have been deterrents to making that decision, and then your experiences doing it. And also, I'm going to have you speak for your children a little bit and, what they may have found, what responses you've gotten from them. So well,
I suppose they're right out there. We could bring them in. That could be an unmitigated disaster, by the way. But yeah, well, I will say that prior to about maybe 4 or 5 months before making the decision that I was going to homeschool, I was one of those people who said, I am never going to homeschool. And the reason I personally said I was never going to homeschool had nothing to do with having a bad opinion of homeschooling in general, but was basically having a certain opinion about myself, which was there is no way I can stay at home all that time. Because for those of you who know me, I tended to be the type of person who I got the kids off to school. I was out of the house and didn't come home until they were getting off the bus, because I would like to be out and about. I like to be doing things and just didn't want to be also faced with the housework that I should be doing. So I just, the idea of being tied to my house and everything, that was difficult for me to even consider it. And then I also thought that perhaps I wouldn't have the discipline to do it. I mean, there's a certain self-discipline that it requires to say in the morning, we're going to do work today, when there's no one telling you have to do work that day. I mean, it's all completely a matter of what you've determined needs to get done. And so I just didn't think that I would be able to do it, to get up in the morning and say, all right, let's get to work. So I didn't even consider it for a while. My very, very dear friend decided to do it last year for the first time. And so I watched what she was doing, and she had a lot more difficult circumstance because she has 4 children, and there's a pretty big gap in age between her oldest and then the younger 3. So that's a whole different dynamic there that made it, I think, probably more of a challenge for her than my situation. Because honestly, I'm going to have to admit, I have 2 children, boy and a girl. Girls 11, boys 8, and they are really easy kids. I mean, this is what I brag on with my kids. They're easy. They are very, tend to be, very easy to, tell what to do, and they'll do it. And they don't fight with each other, actually. More of the issue is they like to play with each other too much, in which case that can be an issue instead of the fighting. But so, and they're quite bright, and they catch on to things rather quickly. So they're not a challenge in that sense. But I still just didn't think that I could do that. And prior to being a homeschooler, I actually not only was not interested in homeschooling, I wasn't even involved in their schooling. I mean, I was one of those parents who never volunteered to go in, for the most part. Yeah, I only got involved with anything at school if there was an issue. And because my kids basically don't get into trouble at school and are good students, there hardly ever were issues to even address. So I was totally checked out. I mean, they were doing their thing. I was doing my thing, and I was good with that. But what ended up happening is, so then, it turned out that I was going to have to move. So now I'm thinking, all right, now we're leaving College Station. We're getting into a whole new world. We live now in Cypress, which is a massive suburb of Houston. I mean, it's a whole different world over there. But great people that I've met so far and everything. Just not at all a sense of community the way College Station and Bryan have, because it's pretty much people, they all work in Houston, and there's all these different neighborhoods and things like that. But there's no sense of itself as a town unto its own. So, I had that on the horizon. And there are some things I just started noticing happening in the schools. Some behavior issues of other kids that I was hearing about that were really being disruptive of the learning process. When your kid comes home and it's like, I'm sick of hearing my teacher yell all day because so-and-so won't follow the rules, and so-and-so's doing this, and so-and-so's doing this. And I saw that the sort of wear and tear that has on the kids. And then I'm also seeing how the way that the teaching was going, especially, I mean, everyone's heard about Common Core, and especially as it relates to math, just like looking at what is being taught and being like, this is actually an impediment to my children learning in a quick manner and way that's going to be useful and expedient for them going on. So that was making me feel uncomfortable. And then, obviously there's always that cultural stuff too. I mean, some of the things they're hearing at school, on the bus, not wild about. And we're fortunate in Texas that as far as the teachers go, generally, there's not a lot of sort of secular indoctrination going on. But that stuff does work its way in subtle ways into things. And I wasn't psyched about that either, mainly because I think it's one thing if they're exposed to it and then you're involved and you know what's going on and then you can address it. I'm actually all good about my kids being exposed to some of the realities of life and being and then responding to them, talking about them. What do you think about that? Why do we believe differently? And really getting them to understand what we believe and why we believe it and how that's going to engage them in the world instead of just, I don't want them to see it all. Mm-hmm. So that sort of sense wasn't so much I needed to protect them, but I also understood myself and I knew that I wasn't involved. I didn't know exactly what was going on, so I wasn't going to be able to be proactive about responding to those things and talking to them about those things. So those things together started coalescing. And then I remember, so I started thinking about it and I started thinking about curriculums and kind of got onto the idea of, classical curriculum. I could actually teach my kids about the history of Western civilization, and we could start them in Latin because I really like Latin. and I took it all through high school, all through college. And, I love telling the story of how my best friend, she actually didn't realize that I'd taken all that Latin until after I decided to become Catholic. And she looked at me and she's like, you knew all that Latin and it took you this long to become Catholic? So I just, as a Catholic now, to have that sort of background is really cool. I mean, that's just really the word to use. It's cool. When we start singing hymns in Latin, I can actually translate them. And it was fun to be able to, think about maybe introducing my kids to that. So that sort of became attractive. But then in the end, the thing, I prayed about it and thought about it. And there was still this resistance of, I don't know that I want to give up my freedom. Basically, the way I looked at it, my freedom. And so, I'm praying about it. And then one night, we were saying our prayers at night and, I just really became overwhelmed with this sense of, in the end, there's all those reasons. But the big reason right now, I just want to spend more time with my kids. I looked at the time that we had together and with all the homework they were getting, especially my daughter who was in advanced math, advanced English, she was taking an instrument. Imagine if you throw a sport in there, the amount of time that we were actually spending together where we were talking to each other was so minimal. Most of the time that they were home, I was nagging at them to get the stuff done that they needed to get done, or they were just playing with each other and ignoring me. And so, which is fine because I was happy to be ignored because I had other stuff to go on, right? So I just decided, you know what? This is an opportunity. I'm moving, a new town, new thing. I have to give up the radio anyway. So why not give it a go? And so that's what ended up leading to the decision to do it. And it's so far, it's been good. But I've been very surprised that how much I've learned about myself and how I truly see education more than anything else. What are we doing? What is our goal when we're educating a child? And that has changed dramatically in this few months that I've been teaching what I think about education and its purpose.
What was your experience trying to pick a program? And I know there's several different programs that you can work with as far as homeschooling.
Right. Well, like I mentioned, I was really interested in classical curriculum, but I'd also was a bit wary about just picking like one entity that just gave you the whole curriculum. And I also wasn't, it's interesting, I was interested in Catholic curriculum for sure. I wanted it to have that basis, but I also didn't want it to be, everything has to be Catholic all the time. See, for me, it doesn't have to be science for Catholics, math for Catholics. You know what I mean? Like, there are things that are universal, and we should embrace that universal truth that we have as common ground with folks who maybe aren't Catholic or aren't even Christian, because these can be points of contact, right? And and I certainly didn't want to be teaching anything that was going to go against my faith, but I didn't feel the need to have everything infused deeply in a explicit way. So I was clueless about how to put together a curriculum. I had no idea what was out there. So I did find a resource that I really appreciated. It's called St. Thomas Aquinas Academy, where what they do is they're just kind of homeschool veterans who set up a thing where they will give some sort of evaluation testing to your kids in the math and English area, and then they'll design a curriculum for your kids, pulling from a lot of different resources and based on their way of learning in addition to their level. But the great thing about it is they also pair you up so that for the things that they don't necessarily have to be doing different. I mean, my kids are 3 years apart, but they can do science together. They can do history together. They can do, we do religion together. So we coordinate the things that can be done together, and the kids can learn off each other. And then, for the things that are obviously different levels, we do different things. So that was really valuable. Now, I will say this. I got started with that. And it was super valuable. Like, I think I would have been totally in the weeds if I had tried to go it alone. But now that I've started doing it, I've actually kind of jettisoned them and started making decisions on my own. And I think if you can go to a homeschool bookstore, there are some. There's one about a half an hour for me. Just looking at the stuff, the materials, flipping through them, you get a sense of what your priorities are, how your kids learn, how you teach, and you find the things that fit for you. Because there really are a lot of options out there. And don't be afraid to go with a Protestant thing. I mean, a lot of this stuff, there are, I think, more resources in the Protestant realm. And generally, they're quite generically Christian. And so there's nothing that's going to be, offend your Catholic sensibilities. But if there are, like I said, great opportunities. For example, we started out with astronomy for our science, which was great because we were also doing Greek history. So the Greek myths and all that, they really dovetailed nicely into the astronomy. But the astronomy book they picked for us, what St. Thomas Aquinas Academy had warned me, was written by young Earth Protestant groups. And if you're not familiar with that, they're basically folks who say that the science is wrong and the Earth is 6,000 years old and, whatever. And so that stuff was in there. Well, I had a choice. I don't agree with that. Right. And so I could either skip those sections or go over them, and then the kids and I could talk about them and talk about, does this make sense to you? Knowing what we've learned so far, using your common sense, does this jive? And those conversations were probably the best conversations that we had through the whole book, because they were using their brains, and they were, you see they're sort of, looking up and thinking, well, wait a second, Mom, that explanation that they say here, well, it totally could be this other thing that makes sense and fits better with the science that we know is true. And so that concept of using techniques to evaluate things you read, telling your kids, you know what, don't just take everything you read at face value. Even if it's something that Mom's putting before you, analyze it, be critical, not cynical, but critical, using the things that you know are true. So, there's lots of resources out there. And so it's now fun for me to make decisions about what I'm going to pick and choose. And I've enjoyed that.
Well, I find it interesting because one of the directions I have found that our education system seems to go is that we do not want kids exposed to whatever is out there that's contrary to the direction we want to take in our education system. And I think, that in a way denies the opportunity for the child to build their belief system.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not exposed to something contrary to what you believe, how certain can you be that whatever you believe is correct?
Right. And I would say that a lot of the world that we see today, which is I am offended by what is different from what I believe, comes from fear. Because you are offended as a defense mechanism because you cannot defend what you believe. If you cannot defend it, you will have an emotional response out of the fear of your beliefs being challenged. And you don't want your whole belief system to crumble down upon you. So you're going to put up the wall of, I'm not even going to listen to you because I'm offended by what you have to say. And so I encourage my kids regularly when we're learning things, because sometimes I even, obviously they're going to glean from me, my biases. I have biases, of course. And I hear them start mimicking my bias. And I know that they're giving it to me from sort of, I know this is what my mom believes, and I'm going to just give it back at her, and I say, no, don't just tell me this because you think this is what I believe and what I want to hear. You need to formulate your argument as to why you believe this. And you're going to give them the tools to do it at the level that they're capable of, and always be open to listening to the other person's argument. Don't shut it down. Don't say, no, mom taught me this and you're wrong. Try to understand their point of view and then analyze it based on what you know. And you can give your point of view. But I also talked to them because we were talking about politics yesterday because, there was the whole Iowa thing. And, they were asking me my thoughts on it. And I won't get into that, but I have passionate thoughts about it. And so, they've started talking in a way that was a little bit more vitriolic than I would have liked to have heard from them. And I said, look, these things are important. But you also need to remember that having a really strong emotional response to this is not going to advance the argument that you're trying to put forward. So you need to try to take a step back and look at things a little more objectively and have a discussion. I think that's more than anything else. That's what homeschooling allows you to do. It gives you the time to have the discussions, because when you're in a bigger school setting, you can't take that time because you've got a schedule you have to stick to. Like, for example, if we want to, we can spend the whole day on one topic if it's really something that seems to be getting a lot out of. So that flexibility allows you to have those discussions, which you might not be able to have otherwise.
Right. You can hit the pause button and say,
Right.
okay, let's explore this because this is apparently something that means something to you.
Yeah. Well, and I think also one of the things I've found, I thought I would be much stricter about testing and having them memorize details. And I've sort of gone away from that concept in a lot of areas to it's more about exposure. Because if you think about it, how many of the details that you remembered about that you had to memorize about things in grade school or even junior high and high school stick with you? I mean, those things, they are fleeting. They are going to pass. But the general ideas and concepts and just exposure so that when you do hear it again, it clicks and you'll, oh, yeah, I remember hearing about that. Those things have become more important to me where, certain things are going to have to memorize. And memorization has its place in certain areas. But when it comes to things like dates and all these sort of things, I don't tend to focus on them too much. So that it doesn't detract from, again, having the conversations. And one of the things I'd say about the classical literature and like looking at Greek history and things like that is because it's so far away in time that you can talk in more general terms about virtues and vices that are being displayed in here without having as much bias towards what actually happened in history. I mean, when you still look at, I don't think that we can look at anything in our history of our nation. Our nation is not, old enough to be separated from our biases about what happened in history. But when you go back, way back, you're able to put those aside, and you're able to look at a story about, some Roman general or some Greek philosopher, and look at it in a more general way as far as what virtues are being exhibited here, what are less laudable traits that you're seeing here, and how did that play out in history. So I like that aspect of it too. It kind of gives you, I think, a foundation so that you can, as you go forward, maybe judge things a little more clearly.
Now, what type of conversations did you have with your husband when you decided to do this?
Yeah, at first he thought I was crazy. First of all, he's not Catholic, so he, obviously he's not going to be as much part of that world, which sort of, I think in general there is a bit of a promotion of the concept of homeschooling in sort of conservative Catholic circles. I'll use that with quotation marks because that phrase could even be loaded. But his actual issue with it when he was first thinking about it was he thought that there was a little bit of concern about not being really engaged in your community, that being in school and being exposed to all those other folks and everything was a good thing in order to give the kids that sense of we belong to this town. But I think as he started being more aware of what was happening at school, I think that awareness part, neither of us had it. But as I started considering the homeschool thing, I was really looking at what is truly happening in our kids' schools more. And so it opened his eyes too to what was really happening at school for them and the way that they were learning. And he's an engineer. So when it comes to the academic stuff, especially math and science, he is, really wants it to be scientific, and so when he started really looking at the math and things, and then I started telling him about the classical curriculum stuff, he came around from that end, really more the curriculum standpoint. But I think he's enjoyed hearing from the kids. They're much more open about what did you learn in school today and what was interesting and things like that. So the conversations at the dinner table have, I think, played out that they're much more interested in talking about what they learned because I think they had the opportunity to think it over and talk about it more while they were learning it.
Now, what are you doing about the physical education, sports portion of a child's education?
Well, my kids are in town sports, so they're both playing basketball now, which is great because it's a good way to get them out there with other kids and playing and things like that. Now, I have to admit, I was really good when we first started and it was still warm and we would go out every morning and do PE before class started and everything. But then when it got cold, that kind of petered off a bit. But I'm hoping now that spring seems to be here that we'll be back to doing that. But I do try to incorporate some physical activity in it. And I will say that, especially for my son, even just while we're during the day, like once he's done with one subject, I'll let him kind of run around and kick a ball and stuff like that during the middle of the day, which I think has really been useful for him. I think it's especially tough for active boys to have that situation where they're just sitting for hours and not getting any of that energy off. So I think that's been beneficial. My daughter could sit forever and be fine with it, but he really needs to run off some of that stuff. So that's been a nice sort of flexibility as well to be able to do that.
We're getting close to the end of the show. I can't believe it.
I know. It goes so quickly.
Yes.
Well, you have me on. You don't have to do any work. I just sit here and go off. So
can't get a word in edgewise. No. But generally so far, your experience has been mostly positive?
Yeah, I would say definitely mostly positive. I've enjoyed learning more about my kids and who they are and how they learn and what gets them excited and what makes them go, ah. And, in the end, one of the most beautiful things about it is if we start off the day in prayer together and our faith is infused throughout the day, regardless of whether we're actually studying something about the faith. And that's a beautiful thing to share with your kids. And I'm just feel blessed to have the time with them. I know it's going to go by so quickly.
Well, thank you, Megan, for coming on. I know it's a drive for you now to come to the show, but we'll have you back.
Well worth the trip.
There you go. I want to thank our audience also for joining us this morning, and I hope you learned something of value. And if you have decided to consider homeschooling, next week, Gene Wilhelm will be your host. And in the meantime, when you are deciding how you might serve God, always round up.
All right. God bless.